Hello, folks. Welcome to Marshable Math. Today I want to talk about some logic. That's a subject that is almost entirely neglected in the modern curriculum, except for maybe one chapter in geometry, and then it's like drinking from a fire hose. You just get wet and knocked over, and maybe you get a little bit of a taste of it, but it's too much too fast. So in most of my classes, I'll go through and rebuild that a bit because logic is one of the three language arts, and it should precede geometry and arithmetic and so forth. Mathematics is built upon that logic. All math is logic, but not all logic is math. But even before I begin discussing logic in particular, we usually go over a couple things. Number one, and that is there is something to know in the world, and mankind can know it. That is metaphysical and epistemological realism. Number two, mathematics is a public thought. Ideas that we have in our heads are our own ideas, but mathematics is not a private idea. It's a public thought. It's something that we all can share in, and it's objective in that sense. It's not the same thing as I have a headache and you have to take my word for it. But the next thing to do is, okay, these things that we say that we do know, how do we know them? How do we say we get to the knowledge that we claim that we have? And so today I want to talk about the three ways of knowing. We'll do it quickly here if we can get through it quickly. So let's take a peek at the screen. Here we go, three ways of knowing. The basic three ways, and there's only three ways, would be experience, reason, and intuition. And most people understand what I mean when I say experience. Reason, I don't mean just like common sense or be reasonable or something like that. I mean something a bit more specific. And then there's this category of intuition, which is really kind of loosely based in, I hate to say it's a bit fuzzy. But let's talk about experience first. Experience would correspond with your body. It's what you perceive through your five senses. It tells you what does happen. Like if you see a car wreck, okay, well you saw what happened, or there's physical evidence in the world that you can see with your eyes. Like shows like CSI and things like that, they're all interested in the physical evidence that you can pick up from your five senses. But at the very best, it only gives you probability. It like if I ask, are all swans white? Well, okay. In order to answer with any kind of certainty, you have to have seen all possible swans, which is impossible. So at the most you can do is say something's probable or even highly probable. And this is based a lot of it on not just five senses, but very, very, very careful observation. That's one of the things that science gets into, is controlled, deliberate, highly specific observation. And so when you're a child, most of the things that you learn, in fact, everything to begin with, comes from your five senses. You experience the world, you learn things. But the next area would be reason. And by reason, I mean really the logical part of the mind. So reason will correspond with the mind, not the brain so much. The brain's the organ of the mind, but the mind. And it is logic. Logic is the rules of thought, proper thought. And there's a little curious S there. Is there more than one logic? Logics. Logic tells us what must happen. The things in logic that we conclude when we do logic rightly, those things are certain. And mathematics is part of that. One of the key attributes of mathematics is that its conclusions are absolutely 100% certain. There is no doubt if it's done correctly. If you've ever doubted mathematics in school or something like that, you've been in math class and you've had doubts, it wasn't really the mathematics that we doubted. We doubted our own skill in using the mathematics or our own understanding of the mathematics. And so the classical Greeks even understood that both of these were in play. Aristotle talked a lot about this. Observation paired with mathematics is where we get modern science. And it was actually Galileo that talked about that. I've got a poster up in my room where it quotes him, where he's talking about the universe is written in the language of mathematics, and so it should be the mathematician then that studies the physical world, not necessarily the poet or the author or the theologian or the politician or something like that. So Galileo would be the guy that kind of bridged those two together. But then there's this third category. What's up with this? I'm going to call it intuition. And maybe it's corresponding to the soul. I don't know. Do Do you have a soul? I think that you do. I think mathematics teaches that more than anything else, but that's a different video. It would be maybe what I would call poetic knowledge. It goes with feelings, but I don't mean feelings in the modern sense of, oh, you hurt my feelings, or oh, I'm angry, or something like that. It's got a lot to do more along the lines with your internal sense of conscience. Like one of the questions I ask in class, and it's outrageous. I apologize for the bluntness of it, but is it okay to punch a baby in the face? And of course, the kids are always like, oh, what in the world? Of course it's not. But how do you know that it's not? Is there a logical reason why it's morally wrong to punch a baby in the face? No, you're not going to get a mathematical proof, although Descartes tried. And speaking of Descartes, Descartes is the one who said, reason above all things. Rene Descartes says, I think reason is how we know all truth. And so I ask, is all truth, can all truth be discovered through mathematics? Of course, the answer is no. But for Descartes, that was the thing to do. There isn't a logical proof for why it's morally wrong to punch a baby in the face. And of course, your experience doesn't tell you what should happen. It only tells you what did happen. Oh, look, no, here's the evidence. Somebody punched this baby in the face, like send them to jail. But Descartes said you really can't trust your experience. He talks about being alone in a room, and he's writing his thoughts down. He's like, I'm not even sure if I should tell you my first thoughts because it seems like they're just so bizarre and maybe only I would understand them. But he says, I'm in my room and it's cold outside. It's snowing. I see the snow, but the fire's going in the room and I'm tucked into bed. And my feet are warm and my nose is cold and all of these things. He's thinking about thinking. He's just kind of like, what do I sense and so forth. And he says, but I can't believe any of it because I've had all of those same sensations while I'm in a dream. And how do I know if I'm really dreaming here or not? Like, I'm not really quite sure. I can't tell by my sensations. And so he says, you can't trust the body, trust the mind. And that's why he says, I think, therefore I am, as his first step in a proof for something. You should read it. He says, my whole nature is that of to think, and I really don't need a body to do that. But anyway, but what about this? Why is it wrong to punch a baby in the face? You know it's wrong. Come on, don't you have a conscience? Of course you do. That doesn't mean that we follow our conscience all the time, but we do have a little internal judge in our soul that says, good boy, bad boy, something like that. It really says what should happen, and it's about what ought to happen. It has to do with trust sometimes. Not everything. Like if you're on a jury and there's testimony from an eyewitness, well, you didn't see the guy kill the other guy, but this guy says he did. So the question comes down to, well, do you trust him? Was George Washington a president of the United States? I don't know by direct experience. I wasn't alive during his presidency, if there was one. There's no logical reason why a man named George Washington must have been a president, such as it's logically necessary that 3 + 8 is 11. That must be true by logic. There's no reason why George Washington must have been true. So historical things we go by trust. There's good rules for whom we trust and whom we do not. It has to do with authority, things like that. Literature is oftentimes one of the best ways to develop a moral imagination, as it were. Stories do a great job of that, which is why when you're in school you should study good stories. So there's your 3 ways of knowing. Now in mathematics, we primarily focus on this. Okay, don't trust your feelings in math. Oh, is that a 90-degree angle? Yes. Why? Well, it kind of looks that way to me. I kind of feel it. No. We're interested in certainty, so we have to, focus our minds on this. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that there is a guy who kind of pulled this together and pulled that together and then pulled all of this together, and that would be Blaise. Whoops, there's a B. Hang on, that's a bad B. Let me erase it. Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal. He does a great job in his work, Introduction to the New Experiments Concerning the Vacuum, where he has to kind of really thread this needle on. Oh, I'm gonna contradict Aristotle, but how do I do that? Well, how do you know certain things? And so he discusses these and actually says if Aristotle were alive today and can see all the things that we've done, he would actually agree with us. But Pascal says each one of these things has its own proper place. There's a proper role for experience. There's a proper role for reason. There's a proper role for intuition. And we shouldn't try to use one of them outside of their proper area. And there's a danger when one is absolutely elevated over the others. And so, in response to Rene Descartes, Pascal writes, because Rene Descartes had this whole mathematical logical system, and Pascal called it the machine, which is his way of saying it's kind of inhuman. But he says, I don't need Descartes' machine to tell me if I'm awake or not. He says, I know I'm not dreaming. He doesn't offer any kind of proof. There's no mathematical logical thing. He's no appeal to experience. He just says, I know. I know. It's an internal thing. So anyway, mathematics class though, yeah, it's a logic thing. When you do your mathematical method work, it's your argument, and your conclusion has to be supported by that argument. Just having a conclusion doesn't mean it's must be true, and the mathematics is why it must be true. But anyway, 3 ways of knowing. Are you awake right now, or are you sleeping? How do you know?